The entire banking system may collapse in the next 5 business days. Silicon Valley Bank did indeed just go under. The FDIC is in complete control of the bank now because literally there was a massive run on the bank in Silicon Valley, California. And again, as I said prior, there is a chance that the entire financial system in the United States and then globally could collapse. I want to talk about this a little bit with you so that you're prepared. Now, first of all, why can I say that there's a chance that the entire banking system could collapse literally in days? Sure, it's true that a bank did collapse here last week, but how would this spread to all banks? Well, first of all, you have to understand what fractional reserve banking is. And basically, fractional reserve banking is where, and this is how all banks in the United States work, it's where if I give you, Mr. Banker, a dollar, you can take that dollar and you can actually lend somewhere between $10 to $20 on that $1, right? So what this essentially means is banks get to create massive leverage, and this is how they create basically their revenue and their income for their respective bank. But the problem comes when everybody goes to the bank at the same time and asks for all their money. Because if I'm the bank and every single one of my customers is giving me a dollar, and then I've created loan products that go out upwards of $10 to $20 per $1, and then all of my customers come to the bank at the same time and ask for that $1, well, my money's tied up in treasuries, it's tied up in mortgages, it's tied up in all these other loans and all these other assets that actually are generating the bank the profit. But again, if all my customers come and ask for the money, I don't have all the money. It's out in these other products, it's out in these other T-bills and loans, etc. And this is exactly what happened with Silicon Valley Bank, where there was a credit rating that came out for Silicon Valley Bank, and the credit rating went down for the bank. In other words, the bank went down in its credit worthiness. Customers of the bank heard about this, and everybody said, oh my God, what if this bank goes under? I don't want to wait to see, so I'm going to go get my money. Right? Because the risk of taking your money out of the bank is essentially zero, but the risk of you keeping your money in the bank is massive. You could potentially lose everything. Now, in the United States, there is something called FDIC insurance, and this basically is where your first $250,000 that you deposit in any given bank are insured by FDIC insurance. This came about after the great financial collapse in the 1920s, where you had the Great Depression. Well, this is still in play to this day, but for individuals that have greater than $250,000 in a given account or a given bank, the rest of that money is at risk. And if you think of businesses that have payrolls to make and other high net worth individuals, obviously they're going to have more than $250,000 in that respective bank. And even if you have less than $250,000 in a bank, I mean, if you could just withdraw the funds and stash it under your mattress, isn't that easier than having to wait for the government to recompensate you for money if a bank goes under? And so the real risk right now is that people may become terrified that banks could go under in the same way, if you recall back when there was a virus that floated around and everybody went to the grocery store and bought toilet paper and Kleenex and things like that. If you recall, you couldn't get toilet paper. Why? Because people were afraid that toilet paper was going to suddenly cease to exist. So everybody looked around and said, you know what? As opposed to waiting to find out, why don't I just go buy toilet paper just to be safe? Everybody then is rushing for toilet paper, and now the entire country's out of toilet paper. It's basically the same idea with the banks. And here's the real thing that most people don't know about with the banking industry is fiat currency is what we are operating on. And what's fiat currency? Fiat currency is literally, for all intents and purposes, fake money. See, back in the 1970s, the United States got off the gold standard, which basically meant that every single US dollar that was printed was backed by gold. But we went off the gold standard in the 70s, which basically means now that the US dollar is only as valuable as you and I think it is. It's not backed by anything other than our mutual belief that the US dollar is worth something. So suddenly now you have a situation where dollars are able to be printed, and this is why we've had so much inflation in recent years. Dollars are able to be printed basically at whatever rate the Fed wants to print the dollars at. You have banks that are willing to lend money out at 10 to 20 times greater than their total sum of deposits. And when you put these things together, essentially everybody's realizing that our banking system is not so different from FTX, where you obviously know what happened there, where Sam Bankman-Fried was just loaning money from Peter to Paul to do all these crazy deals. And then when everybody asked for their money at FTX, the exchange collapsed. So what do you do with all this? How do you make sense of all of this? Well, first of all, unfortunately, the reality is if you're dealing with a smaller bank, a regional bank, or a bank that is not, let's just say, Wells Fargo, Chase, Citi, or Bank of America, if you're not dealing with one of the big 4 or 5 banks in the United States, then unfortunately, the reality is there is a chance that other people become afraid that the banking system could collapse if a large enough group of individuals become afraid that the banking system could collapse and they all go to the bank to take their money out, then at some point others are going to hear about this. And this is a classic run on the bank scenario. And I will say there's a chance that the financial system could collapse and the Silicon Valley Bank going under could be that catalyst that ignites the entire fire, right? It's like you only need to light one match to catch the entire forest on fire if all of the lumber is dry. And that's the situation that Silicon Valley Bank may be presenting for the entire financial world right now. We don't know this definitively, but by this upcoming Friday, I'm filming this over the weekend, Saturday, 2 days after Silicon Valley Bank went under. If the government doesn't come in and back the depositors at Silicon Valley Bank and make sure that every single depositor gets a full dollar back, in other words, if countless customers got screwed because Silicon Valley Bank mismanaged their assets, and if people get hurt and burned by this, then I think other depositors at other banks, especially smaller banks, will also become fearful in the same way that the depositors at Silicon Valley Bank became fearful. And if that fear spreads, it's going to be a situation just like we had back in 2020 with toilet paper. And so, what should you do about this? One, you have to listen very closely, go on places like Twitter and Reddit to see what the people are thinking and what the people are feeling. And if you have the ability to withdraw your cash, it's a safe thing to do, to be totally frank with you. I don't want to see the financial system collapse, but obviously I don't want to see you get hurt. And so, what's the risk of taking your money out? Well, it's basically nothing, right? You just withdraw the money and put it under your mattress. Well, what's the risk of you keeping your money in a given bank? Unfortunately, it could be massive. Hopefully, the United States government comes in when the stock market and when the work week commences and starts on Monday. Okay, it'll be Monday Monday the 13th of March. Hopefully, the United States government comes in and provides full insurance for all of the depositors at Silicon Valley Bank. If they do, I think the US government has the ability to restore confidence in the banking system. And the government, and I'm a libertarian, I'm not a guy that wants government involvement most times, but if the government does not instill a renewed sense of confidence in the banking system, then the charade is about to get played, my friend. Because you have fractional reserve banking, whereby, again, these banks can loan many times more than their deposits out at large. You have a fiat currency in the US dollar, which means literally the dollar is only as valuable as we both think it is. And it's not like people need to keep their money in the bank at all times, or at least all of their money in the bank. So if you have a situation where everybody gets afraid, then it could be really, really bloody and really, really painful. And I mean, this could have a huge compounding effect because if businesses can't keep their money in banks, how are they going to make payroll for their employees? If employees aren't getting paid, how is that going to change their consumer behavior? If people aren't able to get paid or spend money, then obviously the economy is going to nosedive. I don't mean to paint a unnecessarily bloody picture, but I do think there's a chance that things could get really, really bloody. Again, I think it could easily be solved if the US government comes and backs every single depositor at Silicon Valley Bank. Of course, the shareholders of Silicon Valley Bank, their shares should go to $0 in value. I'm not saying that the bailout, in quotes, should, put money in the directors' pockets of Silicon Valley Bank that bankrupted the business and bankrupted the bank itself. I mean, they should go to zero. But the depositors, the mom and pops and the startup founders and the folks in the Silicon Valley who simply put their money at the bank, those are the ones that need to be protected. Because if they're not protected, then what that tells all of us as depositors in the countless different banks we all deposit money in, that our money is not safe either. And that's where the fear can become contagious. We'll see. Follow this page for more to keep updated, and I will talk to you in the next video.